Driving this car is like driving a truck.
It's like a really good old lady that will always look after you.
Absolutely perfectly put together.
When you are driving, you feel proud.
It has the kind of heart you don't find in other cars.
It is very, very much fun.
The company was called Hispano-Suiza, Hispano being a reference to the Spanish money and Suiza to the Swiss engineering. The name is reflected in the badge, which represents the Swiss and the Spanish flag. It is interesting to see that Hispano-Suiza came from a young Swiss engineer, Marc Birkigt, who was my grandfather. He left Geneva for Barcelona and of Los Angeles, trying to design an electric bus, and then the company went bankrupt. That bankrupt company owed a lot of money to the steel supplier, Mr. Damián Mateu. And Damián Mateu was a clever businessman, thought that the only way to get his money back was to create a company on sound financial basis. Well, the first production model of the Hispano-Suiza company was a 2024 HP, which was immediately quite successful.
Right from the start, Hispano-Suiza was producing high-quality luxury cars that were rivaling the likes of Rolls-Royce and Daimler. By 1909, the company was well established and prospering, and it caught the eye of King Alfonso of Spain, who not only became a shareholder, but clearly bought the cars. There can be no better way of marketing your product than by selling to the king, as Daimler found in England by selling to King Edward VII. Early on, Hispano-Suiza discovered the benefits of Grand Prix success to marketing a motor car. And encouraged by King Alfonso, they entered the Spanish Grand Prix and eventually won the Coupe de l'Auto in France in 1910.
It was decided that a civilized version of the racing car should be designed. And the first model was sent to King Alfonso, who drove it. He was so pleased with the performance of the car that he decided that his name could be associated to the model. It became the Alfonso XIII.
This car is a Hispano-Suiza 15T, but better known as the type Alfonso XIII. And we've had it in the family for about 20 years now. When this car was first introduced onto the market in 1912, it was mainly aimed at sporty types, officers, people with a certain lifestyle who did not want necessarily a chauffeur-driven car but still travel in style. And they would use it to tour around Spain or travel down to the south of France. The Hispano-Suiza Alfonso is a descendant of the car that won the Coupe de l'Auto de Boulogne. And that was the first time a multi-cylinder car won that race. And the interesting element of the Alfonso is this four-cylinder block with a T-head. The way the engine is sitting in the chassis with the half bell, again, is something which is unique to the Hispano-Suiza. We use the car quite a lot because Alfonsos were famous for being easy cruising cars, and it definitely is such a car. We use it to go to the shops, and a lot of the children around here in the village like to be taken for a drive, and they've got a nickname for this car, which is Silver Tractor. But I guess if you'd asked a child to draw a typical car, they'd come up with something quite similar to this. I think anybody who drives vintage or classic cars will have experienced the fact that in traffic you get away with a lot. If you're at a roundabout, people will let you in a much easier way. But this car in particular, because it looks very endearing, it's obviously an Edwardian car, and people get very enthusiastic about it. From a visual point of view, several elements make it very obviously an Alfonso. If you look at the line starting above the lower bonnet panel, this golden line will give you the body height all the way down to the end. The Rudge metal spoke wheels make it very different. He replaced the artillery wheels that were on previous cars. It's got distinctively wide mud wings. There's a very good reason for this. One of the best clients of the Hispano factory was King Alfonso of Spain, who had his riding mechanic with him on many occasions. Now, if you have two people sitting here, you have to find the extra space for the riding mechanic. So he decided to put him on the mud wing in a special little metal seat, apparently with leather upholstery, which makes it a little bit more user-friendly. But so if you imagine the riding mechanic on the left side of the car, sitting in his little chair. I drive it at hill climb events occasionally, because it's a very torquey car. You can actually do the whole thing using only 2 gears, which is perhaps not something I should admit to, but I can go from first to second and stay in that all the way up to there. What I like most about this car is that it's like a really good old lady that will always look after you. It's got a comforting engine noise, it's got a very slow, steady, reliable power that you know will get you where you want to go, and it's just a dear.
Alfonso's success was so great that it was decided to open a French factory. When the war started, the French factory was taken over by the French government to make spare parts for aircraft engines. So Marc Birkigt went back to Barcelona. When he got there, he found that the Spanish government had asked them to develop an aircraft engine. The Hispano aircraft engine is certainly one of the factors which led to the Allied victory in the First World War. Near the end of the war, the Hispano-Suiza management knew they would have a big problem with the Paris factory because the production of aircraft engine would stop brutally. So they decided to go back to car production. Well, Marc Birkigt knew how to design high torque, low rev engine, and that's what is needed in luxury cars, so he went straight for a luxury model. He used the technology of the aircraft engine to design a 6-cylinder engine, which was put on the chassis, which eventually became the H6B. Well, the H6B was the first Hispano car to get a bird on the top of its radiator. In fact, the stork was a symbol of the top aircraft squadron of the First World War.
This car is a 1921 Hispano-Suiza H6B with skiff body by Henri Labourdette. I had always been interested in cars since a child and eventually got into them, and I owned some very fine Marcs. I always wanted an Hispano-Suiza, and I can't tell you why other than the cachet of the name, because there was very little in print at that time. When I finally found one, bought it, and started taking it apart because I do my own work, the design of the various components was so simple and so elegant that I rapidly got rid of the other cars that I owned, and to this day I'm a specialist in Hispano-Suiza. When the H series of Hispano was first introduced at the Automobile Salon in 1920 in Paris, it burst upon the scene because here was an automobile that had not only four-wheel brakes but four-wheel power brakes. It had an engine which would propel it to the then unheard of speeds of 85 miles an hour. The car rapidly caught on. Sales were good from the start, and they were primarily, obviously, to affluent people. The torque was developed at very low speed because of the long stroke engine and the design of the camshaft, which meant that the car was really a top gear car. You never had to shift it except in extreme circumstances. The power itself if you saw it plotted on a graph, would be almost level the whole way across the range of RPM, which meant that you always had power no matter what speed you were traveling at. Another very important feature of the H model, which was so well received that it was carried out on all the subsequent models of Hispano-Suiza, was the power braking system, which used a servo which utilized the car's motion. Living on a steep hill as I do, when I take people for a ride, they're usually pretty nervous when they see us going down the steep hill. To put them at ease, I reach down and stop the car, and of course the white knuckles disappear. The overall look of the car is sort of an exotic feeling now because wooden-bodied cars are quite rare. But this particular example is absolutely perfectly put together. It's made of 3 layers of wood, all riveted together, as you can see. The rivets show. Very laborious, very expensive, but by the same token it was very lightweight, and weight saving equals horsepower equals more speed. Everything falls to hand, as it were, when you sit at the wheel of an H6B Hispano. It is a great feeling to be driving a car 60 and 70 years old and even more, keeping up with modern traffic, doing as you please on the road. It is very, very much fun.
Today, Hispano-Suiza enthusiasts fall into 2 camps, those who love the Spanish cars and those who love the French cars. A particularly significant car from the Spanish factory was the T48, which, although small and more economical than previous cars, still traded to an extent off the reputation of the earlier vehicles. More appealing, though, to the Spanish government, who bought them in large numbers, was the 150,000 kilometre guarantee.
The car is an Hispano-Suiza T48, built in 1930, and it's owned by my brother-in-law, myself. And we are very fond of it because it's a really Spanish model. It's only been built and manufactured in Spain, never in a French factory. It's a little car because only 4 cylinders. Its cubication is 2.5 liters and not very fast, but enough to enjoy with it.
I'm happy to share this car with Luis, my brother-in-law. Perhaps it's not as fast as the cars of 12 cylinders, but anyway, also it spends less petrol. And it's big enough to carry 7 persons, 2 in the front, 2 in the small seats that you can fold when you don't need them, and 3 on the back.
The owner of this car, when we bought it, they had a service of taxis in a little village 25 miles from Barcelona. And this car, this one, was especially dedicated for transferring passengers from the railway station to the center of a town. And he did it during 25 years. It was in running condition when we bought it, because it was still alive, was working. We decided not to restore, only to repair the things that were not going so well. But every time we repaired something, we not only repaired but restored. Nowadays we drive the car several times along the year, But every year we are running a big rally of about 3,000 kilometers around Spain. In September we probably will go to the south of Spain, very long run, entering Portugal, and came back always running about 2,500 kilometers. We enjoy it with this one, and it shows us that really the car is still working and working hard.
I like this car because it has been running with us lots of years, and we have enjoyed them very much. And especially when we make long rides, we rely on it.
When you are driving this car, you feel proud, not only because you are driving in a high position, also because nearly everybody shows you, look at, Hispano-Suiza.
Well, after the design of the T48, Marc Birkigt turned to the design of a car which would compete with Rolls-Royce silence and comfort and be a fast car as well, and that's the J12. In order to have a silent engine, he gave up with the overshaft cam engine, put the cam between the cylinders. He chose 12 cylinders because that's the quietest engine you can have, and finally it turned out a car which was fast, silent, and I suppose comfortable. Well, the J12 was a very expensive car in a difficult time, so the management thought that it would be good to produce a cheap car, and that's the K6.
This is a Hispano-Suiza K6. It was made in 1924 in Paris. In fact, it was the last car made in France. As you know, Hispano-Suiza had two factories, one near Barcelona and one near Paris. And it was the last model who went out from the factory of Hispano-Suiza in Paris. I have a family connection with Hispano-Suiza because my grandfather was Damián Mateu, and with Marc Birkigt they start all together with Hispano-Suiza. Well, for me this car is a special gift of my grandfather, and as you have pictures of your grandfather, this car really feels like part of my family. This K6 was made for my grandfather. In fact, he was short, so the seats were made especially for him. They were made in a special leather that he chose. So it was very, very nice quality leather, because for 70 years they were on this car. Driving this car is like driving a truck. The steering is very hard, and you must get used to it. In probably the first time that I drove it, in probably 1 hour I get used to it. And now every month I take the car, so I get used to all these special conditions driving. K6 was really a very sportive car, and really made a big difference between the classic cars and the two driving cars. This K6 has a 6 cylinders, 3000 cc engine with 120 horsepower. The normal speed now that I drive is like 60, 70 miles per hour. No more than that, because it could be dangerous now. Probably my grandfather would arrive at 90, 100 miles per hour, but not me. For me, the style and the special shape of this K6 is really, really beautiful. Now you don't see any kind of design of car as you see on this K6. So it's really, really, for me, one of the most beautiful Hispano-Suizas that was made. It's not a car for the city. It's not to drive this car in the city. It's good to make kilometers or miles and miles alone. And it was especially made for the roads that were around Barcelona and Girona. That is a place on the north of Barcelona.
Well, the K6 turned out to be quite a nice car, very easy to drive, not very fast, but very nice acceleration. And in fact, it was the last car Marc Birkigt designed.
What finally sealed the fate of Hispano-Suiza as car producers was the Spanish Civil War and the Second World War, after which the company chose not to go back into car production, although they continued in engineering. Despite this, though, the name Hispano-Suiza remains alive as a name synonymous with luxury and high-quality engineering, and one of the great names in motoring history.
In 1946, my grandfather came back to Geneva, where he concentrated on the design of special machinery for the Geneva factory. In 1953, after being sick quite a long time, he died. You can still find the Birkigt spirit living, and I think that's a big tribute to his life and work.
When I see the Hispano-Suiza Stork, I think of quality, wonderful engineering, driving comfort, reliability, and as the old Hispano-Airs used to say, confort, sécurité, and I forget the rest.
The Hispano-Suiza is a Spanish car and everybody knows it. And you feel really proud.
It has the kind of heart that you don't find in many other cars, and despite its age, you can trust it to get you where you want to go. So I absolutely adore it.